Yeah. All right, we are here in the lead up to the rate case, which starts next week, where the Public Service Commission, the Montana Public Service Commission, is going to hear NorthWestern Energy's proposal to increase rates again, increase your electric bill again, and collect information to rule whether they'll accept that increase or not. Um, and a first question that often comes up, so we're here presenting this as Sierra Club, the Montana chapter, um, is, why is Sierra Club interested in this rate increase, which is a big economic justice issue? And we, of course, view those issues as relevant to the way things intersect, trying to create good lifeways in Montana. But there's direct connection to climate issues, to pollution issues, because the very same reasons that NorthWestern is passing off, extracting more money from their captive rate base is uh, to pay for really polluting plants that are unnecessary and are bad choices. They're both bad investments, like monetarily, to put off onto people. They're also highly polluting and problematic in other ways. Um, so we're here in this little huddle before the start of the rate case. It's going to run June 9th to 20th. It might not run all the way through those dates, but it's definitely going to kick off Monday, June 9th. Huddling up not to get really detailed in the technical stuff, because the rate case proceedings and all the technical utility things are pretty complicated. We're not technical experts, though we've learned quite a bit, and we'll present some of that information so we have a strong grasp of how this is an unjust increase in rates. But we're here to help people raise their voices that are very relevant without them having to be technical experts. And so we want to emphasize that it's worthwhile and important to make your voice heard without feeling that you need to get deep in the weeds on that. But when questions come up, we can help find that information if we don't have it about the technical questions. Yeah, so outline of what's in this presentation. We've kind of had introductions already. We're going to give the context behind the bill increase NorthWestern is trying to make, a little bit of the history, like who is this player, NorthWestern? What's the PSC? What is a rate case? What is this rate case? Then give information on what this moment brings, this particular rate increase, what is the opportunity right now, and then get into ways to plug in right now, opportunities that a coalition of organizations have created, and tips for sharing your story, as well as just the how does this work aspects, the logistics of how the Public Service Commission takes involvement in comment, before giving you the chance to giving you some prompts to workshop that yourself.
All right. I'm gonna get into a little background. So, um, it's a little hard to see exactly where these NorthWestern Energy service territories are, but you can see that a lot of the western part of the state is covered by NorthWestern Energy service territory, and especially a lot of the cities in the southwest portion of the state. Um, but a lot of the urban areas within the state have are serviced by NorthWestern Energy. And then we have a small little service territory covered by Montana Dakota Utilities, um, and then a lot of electric co-op land, and then one tribal utility. So, um, yeah, wanted to mention that so NorthWestern Energy is the designated electricity provider to almost half the folks in the state. So, major player in Montana's energy future, and has a how they choose to source energy has a pretty massive impact on the full picture of our state. It's not the entire picture, but they're the biggest player by far. So yes, over 400,000 captive customers in Montana. Um, and NorthWestern Energy, as folks may know, is a for-profit company with a guaranteed monopoly in its service territories. So right now there is no option to opt out in a lot of these areas. Um, and so, like other for-profit public utilities, the company is regulated by the Montana Public Service Commission, which is based in Helena. And the PSC is it's a quasi-judicial regulatory body. So it's like sort of like functions like a court and sort of functions like an elected body. Um, Commissioners are elected, but they act as kind of ultimately as judges in making certain decisions around um, utility related rate increases, signing off on integrated resource plans, et cetera. So yeah, one of their main functions is to regulate companies like and utilities like NorthWestern Energy in the public interest, ensuring that ratepayers have access to utility services that are, quote, affordable, reliable, and sustainable for the long term. So that is their job. Um, and every 3 years, NorthWestern Energy is required to resubmit their integrated resource plan, which is essentially their 20-year plan for Montana's energy future, or at least for how they're going to source energy for their designated service territory. And that is coming, I wanted to mention that also partly because that's coming up later this year and into next year. Um, and it interrelates with the rate increases. Um, NorthWestern Energy is also required to get approval from the PSC to increase rates. So that's what we're talking about right now. Um, yes. And I guess I'll mention, so the IRP is kind of like the original drawing board for some of the new power plants that NorthWestern Energy has been wanting to build, including Laurel. That's where we first saw the Laurel gas plant show up. Um, and now pretty late in the game, we're actually getting a request from NorthWestern Energy to increase rates in order to recoup some of the costs of Laurel and make a return on equity in addition to that. So right now the proposal is I think it's 20.2% exactly, but about 20% rate. It's about a 20% rate hike for residential electric customers. Um, And it's so easy to get mired in the details here of the numbers. It's so much to keep straight. But in 2023, NorthWestern Energy was approved for a 28% rate increase. The actual number ended up being 24% rates are because some of the pass-through costs ended up being less than anticipated. But the main point is that they were just approved for a pretty massive rate hike 2 years ago. Um, for this particular rate request, there are a number of different justifications that the company is giving, including the biggest one is costs for the new Laurel methane gas plant. So also known as the Yellowstone County Generating Station, which you'll see in a lot of fact sheets and talking points and documentation around the rate case. Which is now, it's their new gas plant. It's now by far the most expensive energy resource in NorthWestern Energy's portfolio. And worth mentioning that of the sorts of gas plants that you can build, it's one of the most expensive models you could choose to build. Another part of this rate case is recouping 11 million in recent investments in Colstrip coal plant, so still overpaying for Colstrip. And yeah, worth keeping in mind that even before this rate increase, this rate request, Montanans already have the highest electricity rates in our region and the fourth highest energy costs in the country. Okay, so some reasons why this is a big issue worth paying attention to. We know that NorthWestern Energy has plans to build, at least as of the last time they submitted a resource plan, they have plans to build more gas plants in the future. We also know that they're interested in pursuing nuclear, which is also extremely expensive. So historically, the company has been able to invest in very expensive resources and successfully get approval to pass a lot of those costs on to their customers. And successfully get a pretty high rate of return on those investments too. So it's a good business model for them to invest in expensive fossil fuel plants, which is kind of mind-bending to think about. Like generally, I think a lot of people think, you know, we know that wind and solar is cheaper. Like, why is the company not catching on? Why wouldn't they go with the cheaper option at this point? And it's intentional because if they can make more money, if they could go for the more expensive resource and get a high rate of return, then they can make more money overall on that. So this rate case is an opportunity to interrupt that bad business model if we can get the Public Service Commission to make the right decision here. There's also want to mention, like, we're living in a context, as we all know, that where the cost of living is rising, the cost of housing is rising. It's getting harder and harder to find rentals in many Western cities in particular. And we also know that there's a plan to cut LIHEAP, one of the federal programs that helps with energy assistance. Yeah, and we have over 100,000 folks in Montana who are eligible for that program and who are in need of energy assistance. So yeah, keeping in mind this would impact 400,000 people in Montana, there's a pretty good chance that a lot of folks who are in need are going to get hit by this. And then, yeah, I would say the biggest concern for Sierra Club is the gas plant, but yeah, there's also a portion that impacts Colstrip, and Colstrip is Montana's largest carbon source, and yeah, a major contributor to the climate crisis. And we want to be paying attention to both Colstrip and continued coal use and methane gas, because even while methane has been touted as a bridge fuel, it is definitely also a large carbon source. And then when you get methane leaks, methane is more potent than carbon. So both are very concerning from a climate perspective and also from a pollution perspective. I'll pass it back to June.
Okay, so moving back from the big picture to what's going on right now, we have another rate hike proposed, once again, of 20%, is a figure that Montana Environmental Information Center put together of what the cost is actually going to be on people, which is over $200 a year for households. And this rate case is taking place starting Monday. Weekdays, next week, the week after that, not sure exactly how long it'll go. Next slide. But surprise, so the rate increase is supposed to go into place if it's approved by the Public Service Commission after the proceedings, right? But this has not been done before. NorthWestern a few weeks ago just went ahead and implemented most of that rate increase without warning customers, giving them a notice, their bills are just already increased. And Northwestern is using a rule that's not usually used and claiming that it can do this. Not cooperative play here. So yes, rates already went up by 17%. If the PSC rules against this increase, then that would be subject to refund. Really problematic, obviously, especially when you think about situations where people might not be able to get that money back, or just the trouble it causes in the meantime. Um, Next slide. Yeah, and that is seems like one little added bee in the bonnet of the PSC that could end up making this rate case more winnable, because um, we have heard that the PSC was displeased with that move. You know, it's kind of like disregarding their role or stepping ahead of it. Um, and so, like Caitlin had said, Northwestern has been, I'm still talking about why this is so winnable. Northwestern is used to uh, both in the state legislature and with the PSC, getting the things that it proposes and wants. But we think that there is a bigger opportunity window here with this one, with a lot of pieces coming together, including that last bit that they already increased rates without warning. There's just an overall picture of NorthWestern Energy really pushing over the edge. It's a rapid rate increase when you put together the 2023 increase, the cumulative increases, and other disrespectful moves lately, just like the rate of these things being over the edge. We have some new public service commission commissioners who will vote on this. Um, and there was some trouble with interactions in the state legislature this session where Northwestern was putting them in an off position. Um, the PSC now has a little bit of a track record of holding Northwestern to account, and that they did deny the last interim rate increase. So evidence of a willingness to act in that way. And right now, we have a bigger, broader coalition. This rate increase is just too much. It just doesn't make sense, to an extent that not only do we have climate organizations, conservation organizations concerned about these plants coming forward, we have groups that are just concerned about people's wellness, economic wellness, youth groups, such like that. Yeah, so should we get this rate increase denied? Of course, there's the direct impact of that, of not adding more burden onto people. But there's opportunity, we think, going forward, of the kind of feedback loop of empowerment of the PSC to act in the people's interests. And for Northwestern to get the sign, you can't just use that business model of building really expensive fossil fuel infrastructure and passing off the costs. Could influence them to move in a different direction. Okay, ways to plug in at this time. I wanted to share this document we have where we collected all these different ways to be involved coming up. Losing track of things. Oh, here we go. Okay, you are still screen sharing. I really lost track of things. There's yeah, first of all, wanted to say to reach out to your people that this is something that affects most Montanans, like, or half of Montanans having to directly have to pay these bills. Also, all of us in these big costs being handed off to our institutions, our small businesses we interact with, just the economic health in Montana, people you care about. If you're not a NorthWestern customer, or if you're someone who can afford this bill increase, who are customers and can't afford it, right? They deserve to hear about this and have the opportunity to push back. And we think that tide of a lot of people saying that this crosses the line will go a long way. So this recording we could get out to folks who you get in contact with. We're also doing another session just like this one. It is far along in the rate case. It's the Thursday of the first week, but there'll still be time to give comment after that time. So I wanted to catch people who are hearing about the rate case and all the excitement going on the week of. So the next Thursday, the Thursday of the first week of the rate case. There's a public comment period every day of the rate case until it wraps up. So there'll for sure be comment every day in the first week next week. The first day it's 9 to 10 a.m. Each day after that it's 8 to 9 a.m. We suggest front loading a little bit because the second week might not have all the days. I'm going to leave till a later section for Caitlin to go over like how public comment works and tips on the content, but that's a major way to contribute is just fill out that testimony zone. Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, funny with just four of us, or I'll to raise my hand. But at any rate, has anyone done a calculation that would say the average low income person brings in this amount, and this rate increase will raise their cost of living by this amount? So if a person makes $1,000 a month and their rate increase, a 17% rate increase has already been put in place, but if you put the previous rate increase plus the full second rate increase together, how much more would their electricity cost? So if they make $1,000 a month, the average person, or 2,000, whatever that is for a low income person, what percentage of their income will go now to electric bills? And where I'm going with that is if somebody else made $1 million a year, how much would that same percentage be from them? Because that's all people who make a lot of money are really thinking about. They're talking about money. And if they can see that this costs poor person 10% more of their income, if you make $1 million, that means it's $100,000 that just disappears.
I know some calculations have been done in terms of we have that little over $200 a year number for this particular increase. Of course, it's at least double that for what's been raised in the last 2 years. Haven't seen that broken down as like how much would this be for what would this budget now look like for a low income household? That's doable. And I don't maybe that's a figure Montana Environmental Information Center already has, who has been the one who are analyzing and doing all those calculations. But what I would emphasize is, yeah, it maybe more wealthy people are also bigger electricity users, but this is the big impacts are on people who are already struggling or their budget is already full up and all costs are increasing right now. So to increase costs for shareholders to make maximum profits for none of the cost burden of this choice that was not approved and people didn't want like to be passed off to people for, it's really just executive benefit.
Right.
is the dynamic.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing to is, I mean, this is gonna be a bigger impact on lower income folks, definitely.
Right. And
Because
I was
it's,
trying to get it into a, yeah, I'm sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
yeah, and I mean, at a certain level, you're then having to choose between, like, do you put money into groceries? Do you put money into paying the electricity bill? Like that, which is not going to be a concern for someone who makes like $100,000 a year. Or for the CEO of NorthWestern Energy ever, based on his salary.
Right. Exactly. If there was a way that they could see what that would, if they had to, if it cost them as much as it cost a poor person, how much of that would that really be to their percentage? And uh, it might be an obscure way to look at it. I'm just trying to find ways like that that will get it through their head, because it won't matter. If I have a $5,000 utility bill, which I do in the winter or whatever with the motels and all, and it goes up 10%, then it's another $500. Well, that's important to me. That means a lot to me. But a person who makes $1 million a year and has a bunch of businesses, they might only go up $500 as well. But if it went up the same percent for them, and they could, I'm just trying to find a ways
Yeah, how to
that
communicate that. No, I
to
like that's a good
communicate.
idea. And we don't have like those numbers, but it would be worth looking into. I'm interested in
Or that
looking
I
into it.
beat on that too much. I just looking for little things to talk about. Thanks.
But I do think, I mean, another way to approach it is just making sure that folks who are going to be most impacted are sharing their stories and that commissioners are hearing directly from people. So I think that tends
Okay.
to stick with you
Right.
Sure.
if you speak to your own direct experience and yeah, go ahead,
I
Jim.
didn't get Steve's point at first. I got it now, how to translate it to, yeah, the impact if you're not used to a different situation, lower budget framework. But the we're not expecting the people who are the few profit driven ones on this to get a conscience about it, but the PSC is accountable to people, and that the it is in their reason for being that they provide affordable electricity, and that they understand that as with normal Montanan budgets. So that should be able to be heard.
Right, pushing them
Cool.
to do their job to provide affordable electricity, I think is this very clearly falls within that mandate.
Right, absolutely. And the only thing that I could add to that was, I mean, we're going to talk about the PSC individuals, right? At some point, who's in there now later in the
We
talk.
weren't planning to get deeply into that, but we could talk a little bit about them.
Okay.
Um,
Or we can do it later. Yeah. And the people that are really poor and can't even get to those hearings have the best stories that need to be heard. So that's another thing, that if we can communicate some of those stories, if I was able to visit with some people, I have enough I can tell them my own experience. But if we can get some of those stories that where they can't amplify them, maybe we can amplify them. I was down at Sally's house this morning, and anyway, I don't need to take up more of your time on that, but just
Yeah,
curious.
I think that's what
Thanks.
we're about to get to in talking about
Okay.
comments because you can make comments on Zoom, and you can make
Okay.
comments over phone every day of the hearing. So this is definitely something where spreading the word about it is worthwhile and really encouraging folks to share their stories and pile on. Um,
Rick.
it's hard to ignore it when there are hundreds of people sharing
Yeah.
stories. Okay, so let's talk
Yeah.
about the
Good.
rally and then we'll get more into that.
Yeah, it's important that this coalition is growing right now. It is on a short timeline. I feel like uh there's a lot of potential to be really grounded in through networks of all these coalitions who have latched onto this, and um have a strong showing of those people based off of what we're building here around this rate case. So there's a coalition rally on the first day of the proceedings, June 9th. It's at noon. It's,
Next Monday.
yeah, well, this coming Monday is the way I say that. It's in a few days. And it's just outside of the PSC offices in Helena, just in the parking lot right there. So yeah, we'll have transportation from Missoula provided that people can sign up for. We know it's tough for people to get from all of Northwestern service areas to Helena at any point, whether it's for the rally or a comment period, but luckily there are lots of other things to do. There's what, yeah, more of
And
our, huh?
I'll just say we're gonna email all of this out to everyone who registered afterwards. So
Yes,
don't.
just some other organizations involved in this rally: Forward Montana, Montana Conservation Voters, Families for a Livable Climate, Northern Plains Resource Council will be there. Lots of organizations. I can't list them all. Okay. So, well, let me say, there's other engagement methods. Caitlin's gonna go more through like things that are related to you putting together your personal narrative or how your community is affected and presenting that. So whether written comment, testimony, what else do we have? Yeah, but uh, whichever
Letters to the editor.
letters to the editor, yes, whichever things that you're getting into, here's why all this showing up matters, that it's coming from us. I think especially because when you start asking questions about this rate case, you realize that it's pretty analytical and technical, can be if you want to get into that. A lot of times people's first response is, this seems like something for an expert, but it's actually going to be non-experts that are going to sway this thing. And you know, there are people who have it's hearing that it matters to Montanans, also people with power and sway that could influence this, who are coming from like a non-wonky place, and those people being influenced. That's the power play that we're in. So we're going to workshop what we can bring into this rate case in a minute, but I just wanted to go over why it matters that we show up, and thoroughly debunking that we need to be a technical expert. Um, it comes down to knowing that this is a significant unjust rate increase. It's shirking all costs of bad investments onto people. It's extracting top profits out of us, you know, all the while. And it's really as simple as that. Um, the PSC is responsible to put a check on the interests of energy monopolies for the people they serve. So I wanted to cut to next slide. When you go to the PSC website, this is how they describe themselves. This is the top of like, about, what is this on their web page? What is the Public Service Commission? They describe how it's their job to do that. So you can influence the PSC to have more scrutiny, to ask the right questions when they hear from people who are affected. And you're going to speak to commissioners who are accountable to you, and they're the ones who are directly voting on this. So we think that a big showing of people saying firmly that they can't afford another rate hike and the PSC needs to rein in this demonstrated taking advantage can be really affected. We're trying to paint the commissioners as that kind of describe to them that we know they're going to do the right thing, make them our champions, you know, ahead of their action taking, and just let them know that they can make the right choice, that this really does affect people, and expect that they're going to be on our side.
Skip forward a little bit, but also just want to mention that the PSC, this is like in Montana statute that they have to provide. The part of their job is making sure that the utilities that are serving the public are providing affordable and sustainable energy. So, okay, a couple other ways we just wanted to highlight that you can share your story. Writing a letter to the editor, we have some just like tips and also some specific notes on different papers across the state. It does not cover every paper across the state, but we'll share a link to a little guide with the word limits for a bunch of different Montana papers and how you would submit and where you would submit. And so some tips for writing a letter to the editor. This is it's often like 200 words or less. It can be something that's a little scrappy. It doesn't have to be, I mean, make it polished, but it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be like really developed. It's meant to be more of like what would you share to your neighbor? And be succinct, go with the points that you think are most important for people to hear. But getting a lot of these out there will be helpful for making sure that the papers are paying attention to this rate case along the way, and also to just boosting the impact of the comments. So I would really recommend that people write a public comment and then think about using that same public comment as the basis for a letter to the editor as well. You could also consider writing an op-ed. Op-eds are meant to be a little bit more developed, and you should kind of present yourself as it should have more of you in it and kind of more of what brings you to this issue, why do you have a unique perspective on this issue. But yeah, would encourage everyone to write a letter to the editor. Yeah, and you can always kind of address it to the Public Service Commission. You could address it to your neighbors and share like how they would write a comment or how they would show up on this. Submitting written comments. We have a Sierra Club comment form that feel free to use if you would like to. And there's some suggested text in there. You could fully delete that if you want. You can use some of it if you want. Doesn't matter to us, but just meant to make it a little bit easier to write your comment. If folks want to see this, we can go through like the way you submit a formal comment, but maybe I'll wait to see if anyone is particularly interested in that. It's a little convoluted. It means like going between like 5 different tabs and then writing in the docket number. But the PSC staff have been great about also just submitting comments for folks who email them. So you can always email pschelp@mt.gov. Make sure you include the docket number in the subject line, and we'll send that so people have it. And yeah, it would also include your full name and address in that. But yeah, bunch of ways to do it. I will also say that if you ever want support in navigating the site, the PSC helpline is pretty great. Like they will walk you through, if you call the staff, they'll walk you through how to use it, and where you need to go. And then definitely, like first and foremost, want to encourage everyone to make a public comment, whether that's in person or on Zoom or over phone. We'd recommend that everyone registers ahead of time. It sounds a little uncertain whether or not you have to register in person or in order to get priority over people who register on Zoom. Usually it's not an issue. You can just show up in person and make your comment, but without registering. But because because they're expecting to have a lot of folks, it sounds like there might be a possibility that the folks who register end up getting priority. And then definitely if you're planning to use Zoom or phone, make sure you contact the PSC the day before by 5 p.m. You'll get the link in the morning, so right before the meeting. So make sure that you check it early in the morning. If you don't, didn't get something close to the start of the meeting, I would just call the line again and ask for it again. And then usually comments are limited to 3 to 5 minutes in a normal business meeting, but for this comment period, because the chair has the discretion to shorten it, I would plan on making your comment 2 to 3 minutes and just thinking about really knowing what you'd want to prioritize in it if you do end up having to work with the restriction of 2 minutes. Okay, so a couple of tips. So June kind of alluded to this, but there are a number of other organizations that we often work with on issues related to NorthWestern Energy. There are a handful of those organizations are legal interveners in the rate case. So it is kind of like an actual, not a court case, but like a quasi-judicial proceeding. So a few advocacy organizations have been involved on the legal end and are actively presenting witnesses or presenting evidence to make a couple of points in opposition to, especially like a couple key pieces of NorthWestern Energy's rate request, including the passing off the costs of the Laurel gas plant to customers and passing off the costs of recent investments in Colstrip to customers. So that's also another reason why we don't need to belabor the technical pieces of this too much. I'm kind of thinking of the groups who are outside of those legal proceedings as like support forces in some ways to back up some of the inner workings kind of behind the scenes. And I think the most powerful thing that folks have to offer is their personal story. It's just like human psychology. Stories with a beginning, middle, and an end stick with people more than facts and figures do. So would just highly recommend that folks plan on making a personal story the main part of your testimony and then linking in a couple points beyond that. So yeah, and I think it's good also to like right off the bat kind of ground them in who you are, give some reference points about what groups are you speaking to? Not in terms of organizations, but like are you coming from the perspective of a student or a renter or a NorthWestern Energy ratepayer? You don't have to be a ratepayer to give a comment, but I think it's worth saying it if you are. Are you coming from the perspective of a farmer or a rancher or a teacher or a school administrator who's seeing cuts, who's concerned about other hard budget decisions that are going to have to be made if these rate increases go through, or small business owners who are going to be impacted by this. Let's see. Yeah, June mentioned this also, but we're saying again, this is a moment where, I mean, it's reasonable to be frustrated with the Public Service Commission. They historically have rubber stamped way too many requests by NorthWestern Energy, but this is not a good time to demonize the Public Service Commission. So we want to kind of go in expecting them to do the right thing and asking them to do the right thing, and kind of the vibe of like, be our hero in this moment. We need you to take a stand in this way. It's pretty unusual that folks will be asked questions if you're not getting into a lot of technical detail. I wouldn't expect to get asked a question, but I think it's worth being prepared to be asked a question and just know what you would say. And you can always go with the line like, I'm not sure about the answer to that. Sorry, maybe there's someone else in the room who could answer that. If you feel like it is something that you could look into and get back to them about, you could say that too. And then make sure that you follow up with staff or the commissioners directly. And you can always simply just say, I'm not sure, but ... And if you want to pivot to another point you want to make, that would be a good opportunity. I think another important point is just I can fall into the trap of just saying Northwestern Energy, and not delineating between Northwestern Energy executives and Northwestern Energy, like the vast organization or company that is Northwestern Energy. Yeah, Northwestern Energy plays multiple functions in addition to investing in polluting power plants. And yeah, there is good work that is being done by workers in Northwestern Energy as well. So yeah, I think the main point to remember is just like we're talking about executives when we're thinking about like who is making these choices to invest in inexpensive fossil fuel plants that we don't need and passing on the cost to customers. Yeah, and the most, I guess that gets to Northwestern Energy has been making bad investments and ratepayers shouldn't be expected to foot the bill, I think is maybe the most important message that we could bring over and over again. We want to avoid bringing in federal issues and just being thoughtful about like not it won't work in our favor, I think, to bring in a lot of other political issues based on the composition of the Public Service Commission. Also, I may not have put this in here, but I think it's important to note that climate won't play in our favor. So I would either not mention the climate impacts or really minimize that message. Just knowing that it's not going to be a winning message with the commission, but there are really affordability is a good angle to pursue for this. We already went over this note, but this is kind of the main thing to keep in mind. If you forget everything else, like they're asking for a 20% electric rate increase for residential customers. And then while there are a number of different justifications and a number of different kind of sub requests under that request, the Laurel gas plant is one of the biggest ones, paying for the Laurel gas plant and getting a pretty high rate of return on that investment. And the Colstrip coal plant, I think, is kind of the next priority from our perspective. And this is not something that I think folks need to put in word for word in their comment. And maybe it's better if there's some diversity and it everyone's not putting it in their comment word for word. But FYI, good to have in the back of your mind. These are some of the asks that have been made within the proceedings from some of the intervening organizations. So one is don't allow NorthWestern Energy to charge customers for its risky investment in the Yellowstone County Generating Station gas plant, the Laurel gas plant. Yeah, there was a lot of local opposition to the plant, and there were also so many other more affordable options available. I mentioned before, this is one of the most expensive models they could have built in terms of gas plants, but we know that renewable wind energy and storage is much cheaper. And it was an irresponsible business decision to pursue this gas plant over the cheaper options. And it is the PSC's job to make sure that they're going for the most affordable option. And then the second piece here is a little bit more complicated. So they're asking that investments in the Colstrip plant should be excluded from rates. And then they're also asking separately, kind of separate and apart from this rate case, for the Public Service Commission to open a docket to address Colstrip and reliability issues, address NorthWestern Energy's recent acquisition of more of the Colstrip coal plant and address future investments in the plant and retirement planning. I think I forgot to mention this, but NorthWestern Energy is the only utility in the country that is investing in more coal at this point. Um, okay. How are we doing
Okay.
on time?
That's about our hour information session, but while we're still in that for the recording folks to take away, I'll just kind of reiterate or translate what Caitlin went over into like a direct prompt to get you thinking about what you would comment or you would bring. Um we were just going to work through with each other, um first brainstorming to ourselves, what is your stake in this? What is your personal perspective and the perspective of your communities, right? Um, and I think that's all I got.
I think that's good. How do you tie into this
Not
issue?
anything else.
Um, what would this rate increase mean for you? Or for your family or for folks you're in direct contact with. But I think especially speaking for yourself and your family or your business is going to be especially impactful. And I just put in the chat a worksheet that we can also send over email. You're not going to be able to edit this. You'll have to make a copy of it if you want to edit it online. But it's just a really basic format for like, here's what you could say as an opening to your comment. Here's where you put a little bit about why this personally matters to you. And then some line, some version of like, I hope you will deny the requested rate increase. Please don't allow NorthWestern Energy to charge ratepayers for the Yellowstone County Generating Station or recent investments in Colstrip.
Yeah, I guess to break down what I said a little bit more, like think about the different roles and connections you have in your life. I think like a lot of people are ready to say, you know, we can't do a higher bill. It becomes really tangible when you think about uh all the things you're socially connected with, all the things you're connected with through your work, what your your personal life, work life, community life is like, what are the institutions in that, and name those and name the consequences, right? So you're speaking from those places.
Okay, so let's do,
Well,
go ahead.
yeah, to one other question or two, I've got tons of personal stories. That part is, got lots of that. But I understand that Brad Molinar, he's made some decisions and done some things that actually were kind of good and favorable. And I think it would be great if we had some of those elucidated. I don't remember what they are right now. I just know that he's been more thoughtful than some of the PSD guys in the past. And I don't know how. I was going to ask how you use this information. I've enjoyed using it, but Northwest Energy, just as one example, uses, I believe they claim over half of their energy is now cleaner energy, wind, solar, and hydrogen, which nobody wants to give them credit for. But I think it's a great way to start a conversation. I mean, I'm talking to myself if we don't have a bunch of people to talk to, but it's a great conversation to discuss how they are using a lot more of the green energies than they ever thought they were going to, or that most people realize. And
So I
they're
get,
doing it, yeah, they're
yeah,
cheaper,
yeah.
and yet our rates are going up.
Yeah, I hear you. I think this is a good forum to kind of go soft on the commissioners I think it's a good idea, like you said, to recognize where they're doing well, maybe in particular, like the fact that they've denied an interim rate request in the past and that they could build on
Yeah.
that or they could hold to that same standard in this case. That said, I think this is a good time to go hard on NorthWestern Energy, which is yeah, because we're trying to convince the Public Service Commission to push back aggressively on them, which is what this would feel like to them. It would be a big move for them to fully deny this rate increase or even deny big portions of it. So I think leaning towards the side, erring on the side of going hard on NorthWestern Energy is smart in this case. And pointing out that, you know, there are so many, I'll send some more talking points and I'll send along a fact sheet that MEIC has that gets really into the weeds on some of this, but there's so many little pieces where you can just see how like infuriating the choices are that NorthWestern Energy made that got us to this point. So I think anything along the lines of just pointing out like NorthWestern Energy should not be rewarded from this for this behavior. They're expecting to be, and they should not be.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay.
So maybe let's just take a like 6 minutes and go into breakouts. And the idea here is just to um, each spend about 3 minutes just sharing some ideas that you have about what you might want to speak to. And then the role of the other person is just to share, to reflect back some of the things that stood out that you're hearing from the other person. And I think it can sometimes be hard to know what's impactful in your own story. So just the idea is just to get some reflection back on that. So um, yeah, I don't know. We can, I know this is a small group, but why don't we still stick with breaking out into pairs, and then we can come back and cover any other questions that folks have. And I'm gonna pause the recording for this. But yeah, I think absolutely, like, please feel free to share this recording. And there's also a bunch of resources that kind of lay out a lot of the things that we just went over. So I think yeah, if folks want to dig in more, watching the recording is great. Also, feel free to reach out to us and pass on our contact info if someone wants to talk through um, ideas around making a comment or is just wanting more information about how it will go. And talking to someone, if someone talking to someone makes them feel comfortable, we're happy to take the time to do that. Um, and also, I think the guidance documents, there's a lot in there that is like fairly straightforward. So um, hopefully folks will be able to kind of take that and run with it. But so yeah, this first link, and we'll send this all out, has kind of the big list of all of the things that are coming up, including the next Zoom huddle and the rally on Monday and different opportunities for making comment. Um, Yeah, and I wanted to mention if anyone on this call is connected to an organization you think might want to sponsor a day, like adopt a day, um, a bunch of organizations are taking different days of the rate case and kind of adopting them and encouraging members of their organization to go on that day, just so that we make sure that we have kind of a constant flow of people. So that is very open-ended and it's people are welcome to sign up for a day that's already been claimed. But that's a good way to add more capacity if you're connected to an organization that wants to. I'll send the comment worksheet that has some tips on the second page around what to include, what not to include. Bunch of talking points we didn't get to that feel free to really pick and choose from or not use at all, but I'll send them along. Mentioned the LTE and op-ed guidance sheet. And then, yeah, we have this pretty basic one pager that's just kind of like an introduction to the issue and to the rate case and why it matters and why it's worth speaking out about. So that's also something like that would be a good kind of introduction to the issue to pass along or share online or and then yeah, for folks who want to get in really deep into the weeds, MEIC is the best place to go. And they have a solid website and blog and fact sheet detailing all of the kind of facts and figures of the rate case and going over, what was the initial request? What was the proposed settlement? How is that playing in? What does that mean now? And you don't need to follow all of that to make a good comment, but if you're wanting to be able to speak to that level of all of the moving pieces and new developments, that's the place to look. So, okay. Any last questions or comments?
Do your hard work.
Thank y'all for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much, you guys. Really appreciate this.
I really appreciate you. Hope you have a good night.
Have a great night. We'll see you out there one of these
You guys
sessions.
too.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys.